we have got to raise the voting age in America to at least 25, maybe higher. This is all readily apparent now from the complete lunacy and idiocy of the college students and their protests. And as a great example of this, in fact, the best example that I've seen yet, we have a video where Neil Cavuto from Fox Business is interviewing the Million Student March leader, a young woman named Keely Mullen. I think I got that right. Keely Mullen. She's a national organizer for the Million Student March. She's being interviewed and asked some very simple questions, such as, hey, how do you propose the nation pay for the free tuition and the bailout of all the student debt that these students are demanding? So remember, all these students that are marching, they have a list of demands, kind of like ransom kidnappers. They have a ransom demand, or terrorists. They have demands. And their demands are that all college tuition be free and that all college debt be immediately forgiven and paid off, and that the minimum wage on campus be raised to $15 an hour. Now, as is typical in leftist radical thinking, this delusional utopian fantasy land in which leftists operate, they think money comes from the ether or something. They have no idea where money comes from. They really don't. They're all economically illiterate. And so in this interview, it's extraordinary, Neil Cavuto asks her the simple question, so where does the money come from to pay for this? And this young woman, Mullen, is completely dumbfounded. Her answer is that essentially the 1% are hoarding all the wealth, and that if the 1% were just taxed, then we could pay for all the free tuition and bailout of all the student debt and the $15 minimum wage and everything. So first of all, think about this. They believe, and by the way, Mullen's views here, and she talks like a high school valley girl, by the way, doesn't sound very bright to me. And this is their leader, just so you know. She's economically illiterate and has apparently never thought about where money comes from. But she believes that the 1% who she thinks are billionaires, she doesn't think the 1% is people who work for a living, small business innovators, entrepreneurs, people who create jobs for others and hire lots of other people. You know, she doesn't realize that the 1% are a lot of hardworking Americans. She thinks the 1% are all billionaires who have, I don't know, bags of gold coins lying around somewhere like a scene out of Lord of the Rings with Smaug, the dragon, I think that's his name, right? Smaug, lying around on big piles of gold, and that the 1% are just hoarding all this wealth. And this is literally what these student protesters believe. This is their narrative. They don't realize that even the wealthiest people never let money sit around. They invest it. They're investing it in other projects, other business ventures, other real estate projects, construction projects, R&D for new innovations. Nobody sits on big bags of money like these leftists believe. And so she thinks if you just tax the 1%, well, you could cover all these costs. Well, Neil Cavuto then tries to explain mathematical reality to this woman, and it doesn't compute with her. She doesn't get it. He explains that if you took 100% of the incomes of the top 1%, that it would only pay for one benefit, that is Medicare, for only 3 years. That's it. So even if you tax them at 100%, you could only cover one benefit out of many, one entitlement, and it wouldn't last very long. And this woman appears completely dumbfounded by it. And then Neil asks her, you got to watch this video yourself, by the way. It's on naturalnews.com. Just search for Neil Cavuto. You'll find it. He asks her, well, so right now, the 1% are paying maybe 50% in taxes. How much should they pay? How much more should they pay? And her answer is, well, 90%. She thinks that the tax rate should be 90% in America. And Neil Cavuto replies to her and says, well, what about your your friends who are in college now, if they become successful and they do really well because they got an education and they start a business and they make $1 million a year, will they want to pay $900,000 to the government in taxes? And this girl says yes. She says they'll love to do that. Really? Now, then Neil says, well, what if you're going to tax people at 90%, they're clever, they're intelligent, the 1% are not stupid people. They're going to find other things to do, other places to go. What are you going to do when they just leave? And this woman pauses and hesitates, and she's just dumbfounded. She says, leave? And Cavuto responds, the country. Yes, leave the country. And this thought has never occurred to this woman. It's apparent, never occurred to her that people would leave a 90% taxation domain and find some other place where they have more economic freedom. So her answer is then, oh, well, America will always have a 1%. Really? Not if they leave. Not if they're taxed at 90%. They're going to leave, So here's the best part of this. Neil Cavuto is just being methodical here. He's just asking some basic questions, like asking her, how are you going to pay for this? Where does the money come from? She's clueless on every answer. And he says, well, what if you make college tuition free, which means funded by the government? Then doesn't that mean every college in the country is going to hike up its tuition rates, its room and board rates, and it's going to price gouge the system to get free money from the government by giving admissions to all these students? It's just going to exploit this loophole and price gouge? Her answer is word for word as follows. I typed it in listening to her. Quote, well, I mean, ideally, if we have a big enough mass movement of people in the streets, we can actually prevent things like that from happening. End quote. Oh. So this is why we can't let people under 25 vote, by the way. If this is their leader, like this is the best they can come up with, seriously, we are screwed if we let these people get anywhere near a voting booth. They have no clue. They're not qualified to vote on anything, if you think about it. They don't understand where money comes from, economics, job creation, debt, interest on the debt. They don't understand how the Treasury works, the Federal Reserve, money creation as debt. They don't understand government bonds. They don't understand Federal Reserve interest rates. They don't understand international holders of U.S. debt. They don't understand how wealth is created, investment of money, return on investment versus the risk of the investment. They have no clue. They just think like all the leftists, like all the, quote, social justice warriors, all the college campus kids today, they all think the same thing. They think money comes from rich people who are hoarding it, and that they just have endless bags of money. And all we got to do is take a little bit from them, and then everybody can have freebies forever. That's exactly what they think, and they believe this literally. They do not understand Economics 101. And that's the other point here, is that aren't these people going to college? Shouldn't college teach them that the very fundamentals of where money comes from and taxation rates versus tax collection compliance and just the basics? I mean, I took a class, I remember it was my freshman year in college, I took a class called Economics 51. It was Economics 51. It was required by all freshmen, and it was a large auditorium, probably 500 people. And my professor, his name was Walt, and he was a former Treasury official with one of the presidential administrations. I don't remember which one. And he taught us just all these basics, just taxation, compliance versus tax rates, and how if you raise rates, people find more loopholes and more ways to avoid those taxes. If you lower rates, you actually get more compliance because people are happy to bring their money back into America. If you lower business tax rates, you get more investment in business, creating more jobs, more economic opportunities. And what's this deal about the minimum wage? the $15 minimum wage. These leftists are just, there's really no other way to say it. They are absolute morons when it comes to understanding how minimum wage works. They think money comes from just the ether. They think that businesses are just sitting on bags of gold that they're unwilling to let go of. They don't realize that most businesses are just running on the very edge of staying in business. Most businesses are almost perpetually about to go bankrupt every month. They don't have spare money, most of them. I mean, like Apple and Google do, yeah. But those are big liberal companies, so I guess they're okay, and they only pay about 3% taxes because they use all these offshore methods. But no, the liberals want all the local businesses, the fast food companies, the local service companies, the dry cleaner and so on, to pay $15 minimum wages, which would drive them all out of business. It would cause them to go bankrupt. And that would, of course, increase the unemployment rate, because if you can't afford to pay these minimum wages, then you go out of business and you fire people. People lose their jobs. So they don't realize, the leftists, these students, they don't realize that if there were a minimum wage mandate of $15 an hour, they would almost all be unemployed because no one could afford to pay them that rate. See, this is the problem when you have an entire class of citizens who have the power to vote, but no education in the fundamentals of economics and money and finance. They are a danger to society because they have political power and they can march in the streets. They have clout in their numbers, and yet they understand nothing about the fundamentals of economics and wages, investment, debt, taxes, none of this. They are utterly clueless on all of these topics. That's why they are dangerous to America. So watch this video with Neil Cavuto and Keely Mullen to get a delicious taste of this economic insanity that now passes for education in America.